This morning, my question: who had the better year, President Obama or President Putin? Plus, race talk straight from the White House briefing room. And Politini with all that popped in 2014. But first, assassination on the streets of New York City. Good morning, I'm Dorian Warren in for Melissa Harris-Perry. We begin with the breaking news from overnight. New York City is mourning the death of two police officers who were shot and killed at point-blank range as they sat in their patrol cars Saturday night. The officers, identified as Wenjun Liu and Rafael Ramos, were in the Bedford-Stuyvesant community of Brooklyn when investigators say they were ambushed. Officer Liu, a newlywed, was a 7-year veteran of the NYPD. Officer Ramos had been with the force since 2012. Neither had the chance to draw their weapons to defend themselves. Saturday marked the first time since 2011 that a New York City police officer was killed by gunfire in the line of duty. According to police, the suspect, Ismail Brinsley, fled down the street and into a nearby subway station where he turned the gun on himself. Investigators say they believe Brinsley made statements on social media suggesting that he planned to kill officers in retaliation for the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner at the hands of police. And before the attack in Brooklyn, Brinsley is believed to have shot and wounded his ex-girlfriend in Baltimore. The deadly attack on the officers was strongly condemned by President Obama, who issued a statement saying, in part, "The officers who serve and protect our communities risk their own safety for ours every single day, and they deserve our respect and gratitude every single day." Last night, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton spoke about the shootings.
Although we are still learning the details, it's clear that this was an assassination. That these officers were shot execution style, a particularly despicable act which goes at the very heart of our society and our democracy. When a police officer is murdered, it tears at the foundation of our society.
Tragically, too, this is not the first time this department has seen such violence. 7 times since 1972, we have seen partners murdered together, often in incidents such as this, mindless assassinations without warning.
Joining me now live from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, is MSNBC reporter Adam Reiss. Adam, 2 questions for you this morning. What more do we know this morning about this horrible violence, and has there been any community reaction?
Good morning, Dorian. As the mayor attends Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, investigators are here in the neighborhood. We're seeing a heavy police presence as they look for more eyewitnesses into what Commissioner Bratton is calling a targeted assassination. These officers targeted for their uniform. Behind me, you can see a makeshift memorial. Officers and residents bringing by flowers and candles to mourn the 2 officers. One married just 2 months ago, the other leaving behind 2 young sons. Residents are wondering why someone would have come from Baltimore to invade their neighborhood to kill 2 police officers. Now, investigators will be looking at Brinsley's social media, his digital footprint, if you will, to find out more what might have motivated him. They've already seen some of his postings, but they're going to be looking for more. Last night, when the mayor arrived at the hospital to meet with the 2 families of the slain officers, he was met by dozens of officers who turned their back on him, turned their back in protest. Dorian?
Adam Reiss in Brooklyn, New York, thank you. Joining me now, Eugene O'Donnell, former NYPD officer and professor of law and police studies at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Eugene, all of our hearts go out to the officers who were lost yesterday. Talk to us about how something like this affects fellow police officers.
Well, you'll never see America at its finest like you will in an emergency room at a hospital when a police officer is shot, because you'll see people come together across racial, ethnic, gender divides. If you saw the scenes at the hospital of the people saluting, it's very moving. So.
I have to ask you to respond to Pat Lynch's comments yesterday. He's the head of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, and he strongly criticized Mayor de Blasio. Let's take a listen first to what he said.
Those that incited violence on the street under the guise of protest, that tried to tear down what New York City police officers did every day. We tried to warn, It must not go on. It cannot be tolerated. That blood on the hands starts on the steps of City Hall in the office of the mayor.
So, Eugene, we know that relations between City Hall and the police are clearly strained, whether it's over the Garner case, recent protests, or even, frankly, a union contract agreement that hasn't been signed yet. How do both sides in this moment find common ground?
Well, there is common ground, and that's essential. So the police at this point are obviously very emotional about the topic, and rightfully so. It's incumbent that everything be done now that police officers be able to protect themselves. I noticed the mayor of Baltimore this past week said that she was concerned that in the climate that police were operating in, that they were hesitant to defend themselves. Obviously, if the police officers can't defend themselves, they can't defend the people in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So it's absolutely essential. You have a police commissioner there who's the best in America, and I'm sure he will do whatever he can to make sure the cops can protect themselves so that the residents in these communities that are calling the police all the time, they can be protected.
So speaking of the commissioner, Commissioner Bratton was very emotional at last night's press conference. How does a department recover from something like this?
Well, the police are justice workers. I mean, these are people that make civil rights happen when they're doing their job right, and most of the time they are. Whether you're talking about protests, domestic violence, hate crimes, this is the way the police are in the front of the line, taking risks for us. So, no question, this should not stall legitimate reform where that's legitimate. But some of the reforms and some of the conversations actually could imperil the police, and we really have to. I think it's really important, Dorian, that people that know the police work, and there's thousands of them in the city, be heard now because they've been silent, and there's been disinformation and half-truths and lies repeated, among other legitimate criticisms. But the idea the NYPD is the KKK or that they're killing people all the time. We have to stop that conversation. That has to be stopped, and it has to be refuted because it's not true and it's harmful.
So what do you think is a conversation we can have in this moment and we could have in this moment?
Well, the conversation you could have, I teach at a school where I've got young people come up to me with childlike innocence about becoming police officers who are idealistic. So I want to see how we capture that and keep it. And I think what happens in these situations is it's the idealistic cops that are the most wounded. So that on that side of it, why did you become a police officer? Why are you working in Bedford-Stuyvesant? What's the reason you're out there? And there's a tremendous number of police officers that are out there for the right reasons. And how do we create an infrastructure, supports system for them? And how do we acknowledge that they are legacy? It's not their fault. They're inheriting a criminal justice system that has a gigantic racial component to it, and we can't ignore that either. And this is a diverse department, though, and it's a department that's young people that have grown up in a diverse environment. So this depiction of the NYPD as like a 1950s heat-of-the-night organization is outrageous, and more people are going to have to, if the elected officials are not going to stand up and say it, those of us who know this organization are going to have to stand up and say it.
Thank you very much, Eugene O'Donnell, who will be joining us again in our next hour. We'll have more on this developing story throughout the show. After the break, President Obama's year-end press conference and the economic swagger on display. That's next.